Guys, I am tired. I am so tired of witnessing men barely be held accountable for their wrongdoing towards women. And not just wrongdoing, but I'm talking atrocious, disgusting, violent things towards women. I am tired of these men being held liable in a court of law. I'm tired of them having a legal document that tells the entire world that they are a. And what do? We lift them up onto a pedestal. We put them in the presidency. We put them in the middle of a ring to fight with some other dude, and we broadcast that to millions, and we celebrate him. I'm so tired of women who are survivors getting swept aside and shamed and losing their financial security, actually, because of the shame and also the guilt that comes with bringing their very personal, traumatic experiences public. But these men just continue to rake in the millions, to rake in the success. And it's as if everybody blacked out that not too long ago, Conor McGregor was held liable in court for essaying a woman violently. What are we doing? With the World Cup happening this weekend and all these sports things, and Saturday night being the most incredible night in sports history because there were two soccer games and then this fight with McGregor. I literally said to multiple people, why would I give my attention to a rapist? Why would I watch something that I know is going to fill the pockets? And not only that, why would I support a platform that is platforming? So I think we all need a bit of a reminder about who Conor McGregor really is. And don't worry, and I'm not going to insult him about his embarrassing fight because frankly, I don't care about that. I care about the survivor, and I care about all of the other women who are afraid to speak out because their is probably going to end up on some international stage raking in millions. Oh, and let's not forget backpedaling and saying, well, since he found God now, he's a changed man and all should be forgiven. No, that's not what happens here. So guys, sit back, try to relax, and take a deep breath because it's time to let the fresh air in. Hello everyone, welcome back, or welcome if you're new. My name is Erin and I'm fascinated by all things cults, true crime, and controversy. I like to talk about manipulative people and situations in general. So if you like this sort of thing, I'd love to have you here and have you subscribe. And if you want to hype this channel, that'd be awesome too, because it helps small channels like me grow. So this is a bonus video this month. I usually drop videos on Mondays. I just had to get this one out. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. There's no cult compound, there's no serial killer, there's no scam, but there is the sort of through line in this video that fits the theme of this channel. And it is what happens when a person becomes so convinced of their own myth that accountability just stops applying to them. So before we start, quick note, we will be discussing essay, so please take care of yourself and skip ahead if you need to. And I'm also going to do my best to be very clear about what the courts have actually found versus what people have alleged, and also what's my own opinion. So without further ado, let's get started. And in order to do that, we need to go back to the beginning. So Conor McGregor grew up in Crumlin, a working class neighborhood on the south side of Dublin. And before anyone knew his name, he was an apprentice plumber. And that detail is the foundation of everything that came after. The whole McGregor story that the world fell in love with was a rags to riches story. The plumber's apprentice who took his way to the top of the world. And Ireland adored him for that. He was proof that one of their own could walk into an American mega industry and take it over with nothing but two fists and a mouth. And to be fair to him, for a few years, he backed up every single word. He debuted in the UFC in 2013, and between 2013 and 2016, he went 9-1. He knocked out Jose Aldo, a champion who hadn't lost in a decade, in just 13 seconds. 13. He became the first fighter in UFC history to hold championships in 2 weight divisions at the same time. 2 belts, 1 man, and no apologies. He has headlined the 5 highest paying pay-per-view events the UFC has ever put on. There is a real argument that no single human has made that company more money. And Ireland didn't just watch this rise, Ireland participated in it. The tricolor over his shoulders after every win, the murals, the airport crowds. He wasn't a celebrity there. He was a national argument for believing in yourself, which is exactly what made everything that came later so hard for so many people to accept and so easy for him to exploit. But here's the thing about McGregor that separated him from every other champion, and this is the part that matters for our story. The fighting was never really the product. The talking was the product. He predicted his knockouts down to the round, and when they came true, people started calling him Mystic Mac. He insulted opponents with his theatrical, almost gleeful cruelty, and audiences ate it up. He turned trash talk into a business model, and the business model turned him into something closer to a religion than a fighter, especially at home. And that religion printed money. In 2017, he crossed over into boxing to fight Floyd Mayweather, one of the greatest boxers who has ever lived, in a spectacle that made both men fortunes. But he lost by a 10th round knockout. But it didn't matter, and honestly, in my opinion, that's when the real lesson for him set in. He learned that losing didn't have to cost him anything. The myth was doing the earning now. He launched his own whiskey brand. And when him and his partners later sold their stake to Proximo Spirits, the overall deal was reported at $600 million. That same year, Forbes ranked him the highest paid athlete on the entire planet with an estimated $180 million. The highest paid athlete on Earth. In a year, he didn't even win a single fight. So by the late 2010s, Conor McGregor wasn't really an athlete anymore. And here's where I want to plant the idea that this entire video hangs on, honestly. When a person's income, identity, and ego all depend on a myth, the truth becomes their enemy. You know, we see this with cult leaders constantly on this channel. The guru can't be wrong because the moment he's wrong, the whole thing collapses. So every failure has to be reframed. Every critic has to be the enemy, and every institution that rules against him must be corrupt. McGregor built exactly that kind of structure around him. The notorious Mystic Mac, the man who cannot lose. So what happens when a man like that actually starts losing? And not fights, but everything. It's April 2018 in New York City. McGregor's teammate had gotten into a confrontation with the camp of McGregor's biggest rival. So McGregor, who wasn't even booked on the card that week, flew to Brooklyn, got into the loading dock of the Barclays Center with a group of his guys, and threw a metal dolly through the window of a bus. A bus full of UFC fighters and employees, including his rival himself. 2 fighters who had nothing to do with any of it, Michael Chiesa and Ray Borg, were injured by the shattered glass and had to be pulled from their fights that weekend. They were just bystanders. They lost paydays and opportunities because some millionaire threw a tantrum. Now, he was initially facing up to 12 criminal charges, including 2 felonies that carried a possible 7 years in prison. So, what happened? Well, he took a plea deal and pled guilty to a single violation of disorderly conduct, which in New York isn't even a crime. It's a violation, meaning no criminal record, no problem with his American work visa. He paid for the bus, did 5 days of community service, took an anger management program that lasted between 1 and 3 days, and orders of protection were issued for the injured fighters. All of this allowed him to move forward. He didn't have to apologize. He didn't have to make a public statement. He didn't have to really work on himself. He got to just forget about it and move on. Now, in March of 2019, he abruptly announced his retirement on social media, which honestly nobody believed for a second, and which, spoiler, didn't last because that same month, there was Miami. March 2019, Miami Beach, a fan tried to take a picture of him outside the Fontainebleau Hotel. And according to the police report, McGregor slapped the phone out of the man's hand, stomped on it several times, picked it up, and then walked off with it. He was arrested and charged with 2 felonies, robbery and criminal mischief. And then those 2 charges went away too. After that man settled a civil lawsuit with McGregor and declined to come back to the United States to prosecute, and told the state that he had been, quote, made whole. What a beautiful legal phrase that is. Usually translates to, yeah, the check cleared. And then 1 month later, on April 6, 2019, the Marble Arch pub in Drimnagh, Dublin. McGregor walks in and starts pouring shots of his own whiskey for people at the bar. An older man named Desmond Coe declines the shot 3 times, according to what the Garda told the court. McGregor approached him, gets stopped by 2 men and ushered away, and then moments later, while Desmond is literally looking in the other direction, McGregor turns and punches him in the side of the face with a closed fist. All because this man didn't want any of his shitty whiskey. The whole thing was on CCTV, and the prosecutor insisted the footage be played in open court. This is a grown man, a professional fighter, punching an older gentleman who just didn't want any whiskey. I mean, that's a really tiny-ass trigger if you ask me. So that November, he pleaded guilty to assault in the Dublin District Court. His own solicitor asked the judge for one last chance and argued that a conviction could threaten his American visa and create severe difficulties for his career. He stood up, apologized, and promised the court that nothing of this nature would ever happen again. And then he was convicted and fined €1,000. The multi-millionaire had to pay, what, not even $2,000 US? Pathetic. The court also heard he had 18 previous convictions, mostly traffic offenses, plus an earlier assault conviction from 2009, back when he was still that apprentice plumber. And Desmond had already paid out that compensation, but the amount has been undisclosed. So this is obviously a pattern. A bus attack becomes a non-crime. Felony charges evaporate after a private settlement. A sucker punch on CCTV costs $1,000 and an apology delivered on legal advice. Every time, money and fame converted a consequence into an inconvenience. And every single time, the apology arrived only when a judge was in the courtroom. Now, the next part of this story belongs to a woman named Nikita Hand. She's a Dublin woman, a hairdresser, and a mother. And in December 2018, she was in her late 20s, living an ordinary life that had absolutely nothing to do with fame. On December 9th, 2018, after a night out, Nikita Hand was with Conor McGregor and another man, James Lawrence, at the Beacon Hotel in South Dublin. What she says happened in that penthouse is that Conor McGregor, quote, brutally R-worded and battered her. That's the language from her actual case. And of course, McGregor has always denied this. His position then and at every point since is that what happened between them was consensual. But Miss Hand reported it. There was a criminal investigation, and Ireland's Director of Public Prosecutions ultimately decided not to bring criminal charges. So I want to be extremely clear about the legal reality here, because precision protects everybody, including her. Conor McGregor has never been criminally charged with or convicted of any sexual offense. What comes next in this story is a civil case, which is a different thing with a different standard of proof. In a criminal case, the state prosecutes and it has to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, the highest bar our systems have. In a civil case, one person sues another and a jury decides whose account is more probably true on the balance of probabilities. A civil finding is not a criminal conviction, and I am not going to present it as one, but it is also not nothing. It is 12 ordinary citizens listening to weeks of sworn evidence and deciding what they believe actually happened. And here's the thing about that difference that I think about constantly. The criminal route ended, and for most people, that's just where the whole thing ends, because going up against a man with hundreds of millions of dollars, an army of lawyers, and one of the most aggressive fan bases on the internet is a life-destroying prospect. Suing him yourself means you're putting your own name, your own body, your own worst night into the public record, and then paying for the privilege with the risk of owing his legal costs if you lose. Most people would just let it go. Most people could not afford it financially or emotionally. And please understand what the civil route actually demands of a plaintiff, because there's no state prosecutor carrying it for you. You hire the lawyers. You sit for the process. You get cross-examined about the worst night of your life by some of the most expensive defense counsel in the country. And if the jury goes the other way, you might be left owing costs that would bury an ordinary person several times over. But Nikita Hand sued him anyway. She filed a civil claim against McGregor and against James Lawrence, and she pushed it all the way to Dublin's High Court. And we need to sit in genuine awe for that decision for a second, because she knew exactly what she was taking on. She knew what his fans would do to people who accused him of things. She knew her name, her life, her medical records, literally all of it would become public record. She knew the tabloids would put her face next to his forever, but she did it anyway. And in my own opinion, that choice is the actual center of this entire story. A hairdresser from Dublin looked at the most protected man in Ireland and said, "Nope, we're not done." And I'm sorry, but if something didn't happen, you don't take on all of those risks. If you're going to go this route, why would you take on all of that risk if it did not happen? You're taking on a champion of one of the most violent sports in the world, and people still want to pretend that she made it all up? I don't think so. But again, that's my opinion. The trial ran for 3 weeks, and Nikita Hand testified about that night in the Beacon Hotel. McGregor testified that it was consensual, and one piece of evidence became a flashpoint that would echo through every appeal to come. When the Garda originally questioned McGregor about the allegation, he answered no comment roughly 100 times. Now, answering no comment is his absolute legal right, full stop. No one should ever be punished for exercising it. But the trial judge allowed those answers into evidence with careful warnings to the jury about how they could and couldn't use them. And that ruling matters because his lawyers would spend the next year trying to undo it. The jury came back on a Friday in late November 2024, and they found Conor McGregor civilly liable for essaying Nikita Hand. They did not find James Lawrence liable. The jury awarded her €248,603 and 60 cents in damages. And McGregor was later ordered to pay her legal costs on top of that, which came to roughly €1.3 million. Now, how does a man respond to a jury of ordinary citizens listening to 3 weeks of evidence and deciding against him? Does he reflect? Does he go quiet? Maybe does he get a little strategic? No, he posted. Within days, he announced on X, quote, "I have instructed my legal team to appeal the decision." No acknowledgement of the jury, no acknowledgement of her, just, "My lawyers will handle this." And in the months ahead, he would go further, folding the verdict into a grand narrative of persecution, the same narrative he would soon aim at the Irish police, the Irish media, and eventually the Irish Constitution itself. Because nothing protects an are more than twisting the narrative and blaming everybody else but himself. But here's what's fascinating and honestly kind of beautiful. The market didn't wait for the appeal. Within days of the verdict, Proximo Spirits, the company that had bought his whiskey brand, announced it would no longer use his name and likeness to market the brand he founded. The brand that had climbed the third best-selling Irish whiskey in America, largely with his face on it, was now being scrubbed off the brand. The R-Word Crisis Network Ireland urged retailers to stop stocking his products, and retailers actually listened. Tesco pulled the whiskey from its shelves in Ireland and the UK. Musgrave, which owns SuperValu Centra, roughly 1,250 stores, pulled it. The Berry Group pulled it from Cost Cutter and Carryout. BWG dropped his brands across Spar, Eurospar, Mace, Londis, and XL stores. The Hitman video games, where he'd appeared as a playable character, cut ties, with the developer saying it was ceasing the collaboration effective immediately. And in County Galway, a gym literally painted over its McGregor mural. Which sounds like sweet justice until we elevate him back to the top of the fighting charts just a mere year and a half later. But I want to talk about what actually happened here, because it's honestly rarer than it should be. A civil verdict, not even a criminal conviction, did what years of caught on camera behavior never did. It made the myth commercially toxic in his own country. All those years, the bus, the phone, the pub, the machine just kept humming because the machine only ever asks one question, which is whether the money is going to work. In November 2024, for the first time, the answer came back as no. And honestly, Nikita is a hero for that because that is a daunting task to take on. And of course, throughout the years, McGregor's attorneys have filed for appeals to zero success, which is great. They've actually overturned his appeals. And Nikita Hand, did she take the win and retreat into privacy? Which honestly, no one would blame her for. No. In August 2025, she filed a brand new lawsuit against McGregor and against the couple behind that withdrawn evidence. In August 2025, she filed a new lawsuit against McGregor, alleging malicious abuse of the court process. She went on offense against the machine that had tried to weaponize her own injuries against her. Now, the Dublin R-Word Crisis Center would later describe McGregor's whole approach as, and I'm quoting a fragment here, tactics from an age-old perpetrator playbook, an attempt to avoid judgment and culpability. This isn't me editorializing. That's the assessment of Ireland's leading R-Word crisis organization. But since we're here, here's my editorial take. Yes, on this channel, we watch cult leaders run this identical sequence every single time they're cornered. Deny, attack, claim persecution, find a bigger stage. And now, speaking of finding a bigger stage, we have to rewind briefly back to November 2023 because this thread actually starts before the trial. On November 23rd, 2023, 3 young children and a school care assistant were stabbed outside a primary school on Parnell Square in Dublin. A 5-year-old girl was left with life-changing injuries. And that night, fueled by online rumors about the attacker's nationality, Dublin erupted into the worst rioting the city had seen in decades. Vehicles and buses were torched, shops were looted, 13 Garda were injured, and more than 30 people would end up charged. In the hours before and during that violence, Conor McGregor was posting. "Ireland, we are at war," he wrote, to an audience of over 10 million followers. While the riots were actually burning, he posted, and you reap what you sow. He later said that he didn't condone the violence, while adding in a reply underneath a post from the leader of a British far-right party that he understood the frustrations and that a move had to be made to usher in change fast. The Garda opened an investigation into whether social media posts, his among them, met the criminal threshold for incitement to hatred. And those posts were not shouting into a void, by the way. They were widely read and drew approving engagement from people like Elon Musk himself, the owner of that platform. And what did he call that investigation? Say it with me, you guys, because you already know what he said. He posted, quote, "Attempt to scapegoat me all you want." Okay. I forgot. You can do no wrong, Conor. Of course, he accused the government of deflecting blame onto him. In March 2025, the DPP examined the posts and decided they did not meet the criminal threshold and directed no prosecution, which was entirely the DPP's call to make, and I'm not going to second guess it. But McGregor would celebrate that decision by posting, "Ireland will be set free." And then, that same month, because our worders gotta stick together, am I right? In March 2025, he was welcomed to the White House on St. Patrick's Day, where he stood at the podium of the most powerful building on earth and declared that the Irish government was one of zero action with zero accountability. Zero accountability. He said that out loud, into microphones, 4 months after a jury verdict that he was actively appealing. Now, I've covered a lot of people with no discernible self-awareness on this channel, and I'm telling you that sentence belongs in a museum, in a climate-controlled case next to moon rocks. And then came the presidency. In 2025, McGregor announced he was running for president of Ireland on an anti-immigration platform ahead of the October election. Now, to get on the Irish ballot, you need the backing of 20 members of the Irish Parliament or 4 local councils. Ireland's deputy head of government said publicly that McGregor, quote, "represents the very worst of us," and he put his odds of a nomination at negligible. So how did the campaign go? By the morning of September 15th, 2025, the very day he was due to make his pitch to Dublin City Council and Kildare County Council, he had secured the support of exactly 0 members and 0 councils. Yeah. But of course, that was also Ireland's fault. So let's just update this scoreboard for McGregor because it's getting a little crowded in here. We have the jury verdict. Oh, that was a witch hunt. The Garda investigation? He was a scapegoat. The failed presidential bid? Well, that was fixed. 3 separate institutions staffed by thousands of unconnected, ordinary people who are all probably very smart. Judges, jurors, detectives, county councilors, all supposedly coordinating attacks against one retired fighter. At some point, and I say this with every ounce of sincerity I have, if every referee in every sport you play is corrupt, the common denominator in all of your persecutions is you. But while he was campaigning and posting and flying to Washington, the legal clock was still ticking. Because after losing at the Court of Appeal, McGregor tried to take the case up one more level, to the Supreme Court of Ireland. That is the end of the line. There is nothing above it. So in December 2025, the Supreme Court refused to hear his appeal, that no matter of general public importance arose that would justify one, and that the lower courts had simply applied well-established principles to the facts. It refused the application about his costs, too, noting that since McGregor had funded his lawyers, it was hard to see how the interests of justice were even engaged. And with that, it was over. 7 years almost to the day after the night in the Beacon Hotel, the Irish legal system was finished with the case of Conor McGregor and Nikita Hand. And every single court, at every single level, landed the same way. And I want to give this moment to Nikita Hand in her own framing because she earned it and her words are way better than anything I could write. In her statement, she said the Irish civil justice system had allowed her voice to be heard and afforded her vindication after 7 years of seeking justice, accountability, and peace. She said the roads she'd traveled, public and private, had been long and painful. She said this was not just a victory for her, but for everyone who had been treated the way she had been, and a victory for the justice system itself, for the judges and the juries and officials who did their work. And she reminded survivors watching that they are never alone, and that help and support are out there. 7 years. 7 years of holding her ground against a man with effectively unlimited money. While his supporters did what internet armies do, while his lawyers introduced and then abandoned sworn claims about her own home life, while he stood at the White House lecturing the planet about accountability, she outlasted every single bit of it. And when his appeal was dismissed that summer, the 4 courts in Dublin, the actual seat of Irish justice, was lit up purple as part of a campaign honoring survivors of sexual violence. So if you take one thing from this video, please let it be her and not him. That myth of a man got the headlines for 15 years. She's the one who told the truth and proved it and then proved it again and again and again. So through all of this, the courts, the boycotts, the failed campaign, McGregor kept promising a comeback because he required a stage. We have to understand the state of the actual fighting career at this point. Through 2025, he was telling anyone with a camera that he was coming back, gushing to TMZ that he was very, very excited about a rumored UFC event at the White House and claiming that event is his. Oh, and also he found God, so he's saved now. Okay. And the comeback he'd hoped for actually, unfortunately, materialized on July 11th, 2026 in the T-Mobile Arena in Vegas. It was a rematch with Max Holloway, a man who he'd beaten back in 2013. There was 5 years of hype compressed into one event. And in a detail you literally can't script, that 2013 fight was the one where McGregor famously blew out his knee the first time. So the bell rang. McGregor opened with a jumping attack and landed awkwardly. He threw a kick, and his right knee gave out right under him. Then he went down, Holloway landed some shots, and McGregor made it back to his feet, tried to step, looked at Holloway, and said, I can't keep doing this. I can't go on. I hurt myself. I know I'm a big, tough man, but I'm ouchie. I hurt myself. And that was it. After 5 years in front of an arena that responded with booing. So If you've made it this far, maybe you're still wondering, okay, why did you cover this on a cult and true crime channel? Because Conor McGregor was never just a fighter. He was a literal belief system with a fan base. And he ran the exact operating manual we document here every single week. Build up this myth, monetize it, and when reality contradicts it, do not update it. Attack, attack, attack. Every institution that ruled against him became corrupt the moment it ruled against him, not 1 second before. The courts were fine when they were letting him move forward. The media was fine when it was building him up. Ireland was fine when it was cheering. And it's textbook. That is the guru whose prophecy fails and who announces that the calculation was off. The government interfered. The faithful didn't believe hard enough. The playbook has 1,000 pages, and not one of them is a mirror. And the real reason this matters is because this wasn't just and the real reason this matters is because situations like this one have a body count of believers. Real people harassed an R word survivor online for years on this man's behalf. Real people burned buses in Dublin on a night he declared war from his phone. Real people are in the comments right now, probably this video, but of every article about this case, calling a 7-year, 3-court legal process a conspiracy because this myth told them to. So when you donate your judgment to someone else's myth, you do not get to choose what it gets spent on. We say that with compassion on this channel. And I'll be honest and say that it's really difficult for me to have compassion for any follower who harasses anyone online, but especially someone who is an SA survivor. Nikita was the one who held the truth. She had that and a staggering amount of courage, and in the end, that combination beat 2 championship belts, $600 million, and the loudest voice in the history of sports. So thank you all for joining me today. Please stay safe out there, ask questions, and always stay skeptical. I'll see you in my next video soon. Bye.